In 2017, US President and WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump appointed Linda McMahon, the wife of Vince McMahon, chairman of WWE, as head of the Small Business Administration. Fast forward to 2020 and the US has become devastated by the effects of the coronavirus. As of creating this video, there have been over 130,000 deaths in the US resulting from COVID-related illnesses. Now this has rightfully resulted in very few businesses being allocated essential status, unless you live in Florida. On April 14, 2020, the Republican governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, authorized that WWE be considered an essential business. It should come as no surprise that on the same day, a pro-Trump PAC led by Linda McMahon donated $18.5 million into Florida's economy. Now this leads me, a lifelong wrestling fan, to ask the question: if WCW World Championship Wrestling, the last great competitor to the WWE, was still around and was still the threat that they were to the then WWF, would this have happened? If strong antitrust laws had been in place to prevent the WWF from buying its main competitor, would it have been able to partake in such overt corruption? For the uninitiated, antitrust laws prevent monopolies from occurring. These laws had their beginnings in the late 1800s in the US as a response to industry titans such as J.P. Morgan and John Rockefeller. These men had consolidated most American businesses in their respective industries, steel and oil, which in turn prevented the flow of competition. By World War II, these antitrust laws were strengthened in part as a response to Germany with the rise of Hitler. By 1933, the German economy had become extremely concentrated, with large companies monopolizing gas, power, electricity and coal, giving these industry titans the power to pressure politicians to align with the Nazis. As President Harry Truman's Secretary of War, Kenneth Royal, put it, monopolies soon took control of Germany, brought Hitler to power and virtually forced the whole world into war. Royal believed that Hitler's uprising would not have been possible if the country had stronger antitrust laws. These laws were further strengthened after the war to also continue the important capitalist principle of enabling the flow of competition. With antitrust laws come more businesses, hence more competition. Antitrust laws also benefit consumers, who are given a more diverse range of options, as well as better opportunities for employees whose careers aren't at the mercy of one single company. It was Ronald Reagan who, oddly enough, aided in breaking up AT&T, the largest telecommunications company in the US, which over the years had bought up dozens of smaller phone companies across all 50 states. Reagan's intention was that more phone companies could now compete to the benefit of the consumer and in turn workers. Now where this story gets odd, however, is that after Reagan broke up AT&T, there came a shift in ideas regarding aggressive antitrust laws. This shift in ideas mainly came from Reagan himself. He believed that the government had become too intrusive on businesses. So as if to say, enjoy it while it lasts, to proponents of antitrust laws, Reagan broke up AT&T, and after that he and the presidents who came after him did nothing to address the ever-rising problem of consolidating businesses, resulting in what we have now. Mergers since this period, up until today, have essentially gone unchecked. In 1996, there were over 7,300 companies on the US stock market. As of 2020, that number is less than 2,900, no doubt due to the fact that antitrust proposals have remained dormant, resulting in more companies merging. You may be asking how all of this relates to WWE. Well, between 1988 and 2001, WCW World Championship Wrestling had been the then WWF's main competition until Vince McMahon bought the promotion in 2001. Before McMahon, however, it was billionaire Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, who bought Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988 and renamed it WCW. Turner during this period would use his endless wealth to acquire talent from the WWF. Between 88 and 94, Turner poached the biggest stars from the World Wrestling Federation to WCW. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ric Flair, Jesse the Body Ventura, Jake the Snake Roberts, Rick Rude, Paul Orndorff, all defected to WCW during this time period. What McMahon didn't know at the time was that Turner was doing him a favour, as now McMahon, instead of relying on the same old wrestlers and tired formula, was forced to create new stars such as The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Diesel, Razor Ramon. The competition forced McMahon to adapt. The competition forced him to make his product better. Then 1995 happened. By 1995, the WWF's flagship show, Monday Night Raw, had been on the air for 2 years. Around this time period, a young, up-and-coming WCW commentator by the name of Eric Bischoff was put in charge of producing a live Monday Night Wrestling show to go head-to-head with WWF's Raw programming. This launched a new golden period in professional wrestling, the Monday Night Wars. If WWF hadn't had the challenge that WCW had posed, then chances are they would still be where they were in 1995, if at all. The battle between WCW and WWF was a battle defenders of capitalism can point to and say, look, this is where capitalism works. Both companies' products became better because of their competition, resulting in more cash flow for both promotions and better working conditions for its wrestlers and employees. Because there were two major wrestling promotions, wrestlers who felt underappreciated had options to go to the other main competitor. Consumers during this era also won, as they got to enjoy two great wrestling products every week for years. Until 2001, when McMahon bought WCW. By 2002, WWF, thanks to a dispute with the World Wildlife Fund, would change its name to WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, and McMahon now not only had the WCW wrestlers, but also the rights to their most profitable trademarks, as well as WCW's extensive video library, which he was able to refer to when doing best-of DVD collections and extensive documentaries, touting his success over his rival. The WWE produced many documentaries which look back with rose-tinted glasses over McMahon's success over WCW. McMahon produced documentaries The Monday Night Wars in 2003, The Rise and Fall of WCW in 2009, and a Monday Night Wars limited series in 2014 on the WWE Network, a streaming service which, with much of its popularity, reliant on the content which McMahon acquired from WCW. The prevailing narrative of these documentaries is that it was Vince's creativity and business savvy which killed WCW, when in reality it was ultimately an AOL Time Warner merger that resulted in WCW's death. That Winston Churchill quote, "History is written by the victors," proved correct in McMahon's case, and frankly, who could say otherwise? McMahon's main competition had been absorbed. The problem wasn't necessarily that the WWE had gotten too big. The problem was that any new wrestling company was unable to compete. Promotions which came in the wake of WCW, such as WWA, the World Wrestling All-Stars, XWF, Excitement Wrestling Federation, and TNA, Total Nonstop Action / Impact Wrestling, they didn't have the resources to compete with McMahon and World Wrestling Entertainment. As a result, WWA and XWF quickly died, whereas Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, which at its height had a primetime TV slot on Spike TV, has now become nothing more than a glorified indie promotion. The reason these promotions were no match for McMahon was because of an after effect which happens with corporate consolidation, the merging of businesses. That being said, the merged business, WWE, has gotten so big that it's impossible for a new company to come along and compete with it, and when a new company does emerge, it's easy for the larger company to squash their competitor. WWE did this to XWF. The promotion in theory should have been the next big rival to WWE. They had big name stars such as Mr. Perfect, Jerry Lawler, Roddy Piper, Sable, and even Hulk Hogan, who had made an appearance for the promotion. Combine this with a promising young talent pool such as AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels and Low Ki, and the fact that XWF were on the verge of signing a TV deal, it's clear that the promotion were on their way to becoming a viable competitor to McMahon's WWE. However, because of the resources WWE had post Monday Night Wars and post WCW acquisition, the company were able to easily sign Hogan, Piper, Sable and Lawler to WWE contracts, killing XWF's chance of acquiring a TV deal, which led to the swift death of the promotion. The WWE's easy decimation of the once up-and-coming XWF illustrated another problem with lax antitrust laws, that when businesses become too big, they can easily dismantle any oncoming competitor. When monopolies like WWE occur, workers and consumers alike lose. Workers' career opportunities become restrictive and consumers' options become limited. But these are not the only problems with monopolies. It's also that when corporations like WWE are allowed to become as big as they are, they're given a freedom they wouldn't usually have. A freedom to partake in some extremely shady business practices. WWE had its issues before COVID. In early 2018, the WWE made a $100 million deal with the oppressive Saudi Arabian royal family to run shows in their country in the wake of the murder of US journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the hands of Saudi agents. There was outrage which spanned across all media as WWE refused to back out of its contract with the Saudi royal family. In 2018, WWE ran their second show, Crown Jewel, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, 1 month after the murder of Khashoggi. WWE's refusal to cancel the show unleashed a firestorm of criticism directed towards the company. Comedian John Oliver, on a segment on his show Last Week Tonight, made clear that the WWE's deal with the Saudi royal family was only the most recent unethical business practice that WWE had employed over the years. Oliver called out the WWE for signing wrestlers as independent contractors, meaning that they didn't have to cover leave or medical expenses for their performers. You may be reading this thinking to yourself, rightfully so, my plumber's an independent contractor and I shouldn't have to pay for his healthcare. But here's the thing, your plumber gets to have other clients. WWE performers are not allowed to wrestle for other promotions. WWE wrestlers have essentially two options: wrestle for Vince McMahon or wrestle for another promotion, and unless they want to take a heavy pay cut and receive less mainstream exposure, then unfortunately these performers are trapped working for McMahon. It should also be noted that between 1998 and 2001, Ted Turner and the WCW offered guaranteed contracts to its performers. The WWF during this time admittedly did not. However, if WCW or a company the size of WCW was still around, it's likely that by this stage, nearly 20 years later, McMahon would have conceded to public pressure and begun implementing guaranteed contracts for his performers. It's also likely that if WCW and more companies like it existed, WWE's deal with Saudi Arabia wouldn't have gone through. A deal of this kind would have most likely seen investors and advertisers flock to McMahon's main competition if it meant less negative media attention. This brings us to now. The reason WWE was able to receive essential business status was due to the influence that it is now able to yield. WWE was influential enough that Linda McMahon, the CEO, was given a job in the Trump administration, and with that influence, she essentially bribed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to make her company essential. You may be asking, what can we do about it? Maybe we could boycott WWE programming. Well, considering that WWE's TV ratings are currently at an historic low, that won't do much harm to the company. Rather, the problem is that WWE's investors and advertisers don't have an alternative to get behind besides the WWE. If they did, there is no doubt that WWE wouldn't have had the influence it currently has. WWE isn't big because of how large it has grown since the 90s, because truthfully, it hasn't grown that much. It produces more content, sure, but it doesn't bring in that much more money. That is, unless you're making deals with oppressive oligarchs. What makes the WWE big is that it's the only game in town. Antitrust laws aren't just a way to keep businesses innovating. These laws also serve as a check and balance to prevent business rivals from participating in unethical and, in WWE's case, reprehensible practices. If capitalism is a house of cards, the antitrust laws, which prevent businesses from monopolizing industries, are the glue that holds them together. Which finally brings me to tell you what the WWE won't tell you, that they're part of a system where businesses are allowed to merge and monopolize, oftentimes unchecked. That if you were to ask a wrestling fan what was the best year in professional wrestling, they will most likely answer any year between 1984 and 2001, the years in which the then WWF faced its most fierce competition. The years since 2001 have seen the quality in WWE dip, yet McMahon has never been richer. Why? Because McMahon no longer cares about the quality of his product. He cares about which deals will line his pockets best. An antidote to this would be a government which imposes strong antitrust laws to help flow competition, which in turn would force McMahon to make the quality of his product the priority, just as it did in the 90s, and that is what the WWE won't tell you.